In this video, I will discuss Antarctica as being a continent according to specifically the Jerusalem map developed by Kevin Hobby, which is just the azimuthal equidistant map with Jerusalem as the center of the world instead of the North Pole. That map is the one you are looking at on your screen right now. It's the map that I've been believing is possibly the correct map for the zetetic Earth plane, but almost certainly the actual and true map is, of course, going to have many variations of this, if this is indeed even the correct one. The reason I've been glomming on to the Jerusalem map is because it accounts for the southern star trails viewed from Australia, South Africa, anywhere in the southern hemisphere, so-called, or what I call the outer ring in the zetetic gyroscope model of flat Earth. That specific model is discussed in Zeteticism volumes 1 through 5, especially volumes 1 and 4, where it is discussed that it's possible that our flat Earth system, our zetetic system that we live in, is actually an embowed Earth plane, slightly bent, but more or less flattish, which is inside of another sphere which is spinning, the center of the world being on the equatorial region of this spinning gyroscope. The gyroscopic motions account for things such as tides and wind patterns and ocean currents, which is demonstrated in specific detail and modeled empirically at the end of Zeteticism Volume 1. The spinning is otherwise uniform, and therefore the only account of it that is detectable is the centrifugal force, which is gravitation. Otherwise, the gyroscopic precession occurs probably over the course of a month or many months, and therefore is hardly detectable except in very minute ways, such as with ocean currents, as just mentioned. But to get on with what I want to discuss, what I would like to cover is the DVD you are seeing the cover of on your screen right now, Surrendered and Untamed, is a very little known, little dispersed DVD about some fellows that are traveling across Antarctica. They don't actually go across Antarctica the long way. They cross it in a segment, as you're seeing in your screen now, which is what apparently all surveyors of Antarctica follow in roughly these paths. Firstly, it's very, very difficult for me to believe that this video is somehow faked and is not genuine and real. Therefore, if it is, these fellows in this video did in fact cross some sort of continental aspect of Antarctica. The DVD is very little dispersed, as said. Here you will notice on Amazon.com it has a very low sales ranking and only one review, indicating extremely low viewership and popularity, and it's an almost unknown DVD. Of course, it could be faked, but again, that seems almost outlandish to think that would be the case, and it's almost certainly the case that it is real. For the purposes of this video, I will assume from this point that the DVD is real and everything reported in the DVD is fact, and these fellows did cross part of Antarctica. The question then becomes, if the zetetic plane contains an ice wall, and that's what Antarctica is, in fact not a continent but a wall or rim around the edge of the zetetic plane in a circular or roughly circular fashion, then how could these fellows have crossed something that resembles a continent and not know that they're not crossing what they think they are crossing, which is Antarctica according to the heliocentric model of planet Earth, which is in fact a zetetic plane? What is certain is that this will be some sort of a departure from the ice wall model. And from what I can tell, there are two ways that this can happen. If there are more, it's possible that I could have missed it, but these are the only two that I can think of. The first would be that there is a tremendous bulge in part of the ice wall, somewhere centered below Africa, as showing here on your screen. The second model would involve not a bulge, but simply another continent where the bulge and the ice wall would be. And the idea of an ice wall existing would be independent of the topic of this additional continent. There may or may not be an ice wall, and what is called Antarctica would simply be this additional continent located below Africa, as you're seeing on your screen now. Since I have not been to these regions of the zetetic Earth plane, I do not know which model would be correct, if either. However, I personally prefer the second model of the continent because it goes with the Jerusalem map nicely, and more importantly, it fits with the zetetic eye gyroscope model, which has absolutely no need for any sort of ice wall of any sort. And in fact, the zetetic eye gyroscope model does not involve any sort of theorization of what is happening at the so-called edge, if there is one, of the zetetic plane. It could be simply that the Earth disk contacts directly the inner surface of the zetetic eye gyroscope sphere. Or it could be the case that it doesn't connect, and instead the zetetic eye gyroscope plane to the zetetic eye gyroscope spheres inside by something on the bottom underside portions of the zetetic plane, such as perhaps some pillars or stilts, that firmly and immovably fix the Earth plane to the inside of the zetetic eye gyroscope sphere, to where the Earth plane does not move with respect to the zetetic eye gyroscope sphere. The zetetic eye gyroscope model does not involve any speculation on any of these issues due to the fact that there are empirical deficiencies in any sort of knowledge of what is going on in these regions of the zetetic plane. But for the remainder of this video, we will simply discuss how, in fact, these travelers can traverse something called Antarctica through these two models. One is a bulge and ice wall, which is aligned more with the popular notion of flat Earth, which involves the theoretical non-empirical ice wall, and the second involves the idea of an additional continent, both of which will involve a landmass that is crossed below Africa according to the Jerusalem map, according to the theory of the zetetic eye gyroscope. So let's proceed in discussing how this would happen, which is very simple. In the aforementioned video that is called Surrendered and Untamed, which we are taking as a sort of verification that Antarctica exists and can appear to those walking across it as a continent of some 700 miles or so of travel. They say that they entered the Patriot Hills base camp in the film.
To get out there and test the limits of man and the environment.
That's where they start the trek across Antarctica, and apparently this is roughly the area where it is typically started for anybody to cross, since to my knowledge people tend to be taking more or less the same path when they cross Antarctica. People are going this way, not something like, for example, this way. It appears that in general all so-called Antarctic expeditions take roughly this same path. They generally worked in this area, the path, and then over in this area, which would be perhaps the bulge, if the bulge theory is correct. If the continent theory is correct, such as the Jerusalem map involves, then if a different trajectory was taken and somebody ended up, for example, over here, they would be in a location that virtually and nearly no people have ever been to. They could be the first person setting foot on a certain geographical point on Earth. According to the academic and heliocentric mainstream ideas of Earth and history and science and so forth. Therefore, it is curious that basically the same path is taken by all people. Perhaps this is a path which has been informed to people is the best path to take, and so people follow along and naturally just take it. Otherwise, we are left to believe that virtually no people on Earth, except perhaps a few government officials here and there can claim to have been in other parts of Antarctica, and therefore virtually nothing is known about it, such as if it is part of an ice wall or part of a continent which is not where it is believed to be on a globe planet, and is situated, for example, where it is placed in the Jerusalem map. I'm sure there are examples of people who have said they have taken very different trajectories than the common paths taken in the map you are seeing here. But the point is, we are talking about an astonishingly small amount of people, if any. There should be vast amounts of Antarctica, according to the standard idea of what Antarctica is, according to the heliocentric model, where literally nobody has ever walked. So astonishingly little is known about Antarctica. It could be very easily faked to be something quite different than what we're told it is by the professional academic and professional science view according to the globe of the heliocentric model. Things could be quite easily covered up due to the fact that such an astonishingly few amount of people have been into the interior and crossing Antarctica, and far, far fewer yet have been to the remotest locations, which is the bulk of the so-called continent that we're discussing here. It is difficult to say that Antarctica doesn't exist, and therefore that is not the position held by ZeteticismDotCom at the moment, given all the records of people seeing it and flying over it. However, it's a very small leap in logic to say that Antarctica is very different than what we're told it is, such as being in accord with the Bulge theory or the continent theory according to the Jerusalem map, oriented in the way you are seeing in your screen now. One could travel to and from various places on the coast of Antarctica from the continents and the Earth plane and not have any idea that they're not traveling on a heliocentric ball. Here is an example of an expedition that purports to have gone a very different route, ending up somewhere in this region over here. They were purported to have been returned on a Soviet ship called the Professor Zubov, according to Wikipedia's 1990 International Trans-Antarctic Expedition entry. Notice in that entry right here, it says, "No one has ever tried a polar crossing of such length. It is unlikely anyone ever will again." So as was just said a moment ago, virtually nothing is known about parts of Antarctica outside of this common paths region that we've been discussing. Apparently, if the Professor Zubov boat is a government boat, then the return of these people that made this expedition would be in the hands of government, and therefore would be back to the original problem, which is that governments are the ones, an astonishingly few amount of people in governments are the ones who know about these remote parts of Antarctica, and virtually no theoretical or empirical information of any sort exists from them outside of agencies such as NASA and other government agencies. So in summary, the idea of Antarctic expeditions is not in any way problematical for the zetetic model of Earth. And as with so many other things about our world, such as airline flight patterns, the strange oddities about NASA, the oddities about the Antarctic cruises and Arctic airline trips with Antarctica Airlines, the Antarctica sailboat race, all of these things have enormously strange qualities to them, which are unexpected. For example, the Antarctic boat race, only a few people have ever done it. Some of the same people do it every year, and they never get very close to Antarctica, as the GeoShifter YouTube channel has pointed out. These Antarctic expeditions also fit in the same pattern, which is that they have all kinds of curious aspects to them. Why the same path taken all the time? I'm sure, of course, there's some reason that people are going to give, such as people falling through the ice or mountains in the way and so forth. But as implied above, how do we know? There's virtually no information on the vast majority of Antarctica other than clandestine government agencies. But to get back to the point, the idea of Antarctic expeditions is in no way problematical for Zeteticism.
No, actually, you're in a very